Oh, what's up? We'll get started soon. I don't know. I don't know if anyone's here yet. So I'll stall for a few seconds. We'll see who shows up, what the vibe is. If not, I'll just start going because I know some folks watch this after the fact, which is totally fine. You don't have to watch it live. You miss out, I guess, because part of the fun is interacting. Happy Friday, everyone. What is a Friday anymore? What is a week? What does it mean to get to the end of something? I mean, I guess this relates to the book we're going to talk about, but how much of how we conceive of time is built around labor? That we even, the weekend, recent human invention. Why do we have weekends? Because of labor. And labor rights and fighting for time that we're working. So there you go. Let's see, it's 5:02. I'll kind of wait another second, but great. So I'm excited today because we're going to start talking about Byung-Chun Han's The Burnout Society. We've talked about this for a while. It's something that I've been excited to read. I mean, in one sense, because I'm excited to read like a new philosopher. I think sometimes, while it's important to be grounded in the history in philosophy and like that we've read all the classics, not all the classics, but we know the tradition. Sometimes there can almost be this like bias towards the past, and I think that the thing I appreciate most about contemporary philosophers, and let me say this, I think there's something different about being a philosopher and being like a scholar or a professor of philosophy. Like I've been a scholar, I've been a teacher of philosophy, but I don't think of myself as someone who's ever been like, in the classical sense of the term, a philosopher. And what for me distinguishes that is the difference between sort of like finding new angles or new ways to articulate or think about existing thinkers, and the difference between that and sort of re-articulating philosophical questions or problems. All the work I've ever done falls within pre-existing paradigms, and I've tried to like think of some shit differently. I think that I don't know, I'm gonna sound pretentious. I think I've done some interesting stuff with Kierkegaard's work, but I'm not really a philosopher. And I think that someone like Byung-Chun Han is closer to that. And I think what characterizes someone who's doing work that is philosophical, that we could call like philosophy in the present, is they are doing work that responds to contemporary problems, contemporary issues, and contemporary situations. I think that something that's important to remember is that all philosophy is situated in a context, and it's very easy to, read the Greeks and forget that these are just like dead dudes who lived in Athens thousands of years ago, some of whom thought like, if we're just gonna be really crass here, some of whom thought slavery was chill, some of whom thought like fucking children was chill. To be clear, none of these things are chill or good or anything. They're pretty vile. But thought emerges from a situation. And thought emerges from a situation where a person, a thinker, an activist, a subject is interacting with a particular environment. So we talked about this last week. So we were talking about Sartre and de Beauvoir. Let's pull this up. Is that the good one? Which picture do I like best? Let's do this one. So our friends, which way do I point? No, I gotta go this way. Our friends, Sartre and de Beauvoir right there with Che Guevara. Or is that Castro? Oh, I think that's Castro. Maybe that's problematic. Is it problematic that Castro's up? I don't know. I hope it's not problematic. It's just a pretty picture. But what makes Sartre and de Beauvoir and, like we talked about Merleau-Ponty and Albert Camus so interesting is they were thinking from within a particular context, right? We talked about how their thought was really, for lack of a better term, shaped by the experience of the war in Europe, of the experience of France being occupied. It's weird that no one has commented on anything. Normally there's some more action here. I'm just going to say hi in the chat to make sure things are happening there. Sorry if that's annoying to you that I did that. I'm going to do one more thing while we kind of get set up and get cruising. I hope that doesn't annoy anyone too bad. Hold on. Actually, don't hold on. Don't hold on. We're good. Sorry about that, everyone. So I just want to make sure this is working. I think sometimes the reason that I know I'm streaming is that someone is like, "Hey, what's up, though?" And then I see it, and then I know that we're streaming. I'm gonna start watching my own channel. Okay, cool. So we're live. All right, cool. So I'm just going to talk then if people show up. That's awesome. If not, you all can check this out later. So to talk about Sartre and de Beauvoir again. Main point here that they're thinking from within a situation. And their thought is influenced and shaped by that. Now, this means a couple of things. One, that, we need to think about their thought within a particular context. Because maybe there's parts of it that don't make sense to us, that we don't relate to. The other thing we have to realize is that thought, this is going to sound kind of hippie and corny, but thought is alive, right? And that means if we're taking an idea from a thinker who, was coming up with their ideas 80 years ago in Paris or 2,000 years ago in Athens or whatever, we need to think about our situation in relation to that. I think this comes up a lot when people think about Marx and Marx's political philosophy, because Marx was responding to an era where labor had shifted to material industrial labor. And now we know, and there's a lot of good work on this, a lot of labor is immaterial labor, especially in the West. Of course, there's still factories and material production all around the world. Oh, Dude Abides, good to see you. Happy birthday, man. Fucking happy birthday to Dude Abides. I don't know what day it was. I know it was this week. So if I should have had like happy birthday queued and could have played the song for you. But I'm glad the vibe is mellow. I love a mellow vibe. But yeah, so like I was saying before, someone like Marx, when he's talking about class analysis and how work has affected society, he's thinking about industrial labor in the north of England. We don't have that now. Our economy, and I'm going to speak specifically to the West and North America because that's the context I know. If you're from outside that context, I hope you don't think that I'm ignoring you. I just don't want to speak to shit that I don't know about. But we live in a largely immaterial and service-oriented economy. Most jobs involve either performing a service or delivering stuff, or doing stuff on screens. And here I'm thinking primarily of like working class and middle class jobs, and we've moved in that direction. And some people might be like, "Oh, well, Marx is stupid because he never knew about what it meant to be an Uber driver or a remote telemarketer worker, whatever it is." But we have to do the work then of taking the core of those ideas and applying it to our situation. And in this one, wait, I'm just switching these pictures around like a fool. Which one did I want? There's one with Che, by the way, the Che Guevara one, where he's lighting Sartre's cigar. That's pretty sick. And the reason I get into that is because that's what we have happening here in the Burnout Society. Now, why do I find this book interesting? Why did I want to talk about it? Because I think this is a really real phenomenon of burnout. Now, if anyone has seen this, you might have heard of it. There's a writer, not a philosopher, but what is a philosopher? A writer named Anne Helen Peterson put out a book this week called Can't Even, Millennials and the Burnout Generation. And she wrote an article, a long BuzzFeed article that's called like Millennial Burnout that you can look up, read for free. It gets to the core of the argument. But she's a popular writer, a journalist who's been really into this idea that millennials especially, and a lot of younger people, are feeling burnout. That the way we experience work, the way we experience the pressures of social life and economic life are burning us out. So it's cool to see a philosophical analysis of this. And I think for any of us, I imagine any of us who are watching this, we probably all grew up in like the 90s or the early 2000s. We've had a pretty rough run in terms of how labor has developed, how the type of jobs we've been in. For a lot of us, we like went to school and we worked jobs when we were in school, but then we took on debt while working jobs while we were in school. Then we finished school and the good jobs we thought might be there weren't there. Or maybe the dependable industrial job we thought would be there, the factory got shut down because things got, offshored or whatever it might be. And then maybe we lived through an economic collapse in 2008 and we're going through one again right now. And we feel kind of like, when is it going to stop? When will we get to chill the fuck out and maybe just like have a decent life where we go to work, go to the doctor we want to, all that sort of pretty stuff. And I think this book gets into that general question. Now, the philosopher in play here, Byung-Chun Han, interesting story as well. I think I don't normally care about the biographies of people, but relatively interesting that this is someone who, maybe we'll do this. That's fun. Someone who, let me do that so then that stays there. Everything works out. It's all great. But yeah, he's originally from South Korea, studied metallurgy, moved to Germany when he didn't know German. That's so hard to be 26 and get to the point where you're like a German academic. So like major props to him. If anyone else has done that, I think you're a goddamn hero. Studied Heidegger, or did his dissertation work on Heidegger, so comes out of that tradition of phenomenology. We can talk about that more later. And I think I saw someone say that because he learned, I guess, German as a second language, his writing avoids the digressions that are very common to German philosophy. I think I definitely see that, and it's pretty nice to see. So here's what I'm going to talk about today. So if you are following along right now, cool. If you're watching this later, that's awesome as well. I want to talk a little bit about the first two short sections of this book. One is called, where is this? One is called Neuronal Power. We're going to talk about that, and then Beyond Disciplinary Society. If you've already read these, you're good to go. If you tried to read them and you were like, this makes no fucking sense, you're in the right place. And if you havenent read these at all, we can talk about it and then you can go read it. So that's really great. Oh yeah, Dude Abides, I did on Culture Binge this week talk about, the notion of parents pushing their kids to go to college that came from an interview with that writer, Anne Helen Peterson. So maybe I'm reading her book right now. So maybe there's some stuff from that book that's a little more practical that we can bring up in this discussion. So here's the first thing I think is really interesting. And this is pretty funny. There's a funny thing that happens right off the bat in this book. Also, too, if you still haven't seen this, I posted today on Twitter a link to most of this book. It's like a PDF that has, I think, everything but the last essay. I know there's better versions out there, but if you're right now just like, fuck, I want to follow along, I want to look at what's going on, my Twitter's at the bottom, at Michael O'Burns. If you go there, go down a few posts through my inane ramblings and other bullshit, you'll see a link to a PDF of this book. So what he does right off the bat is he's in this book, he starts talking about how every age has its own affliction. Basically, like every age has its own problems. Every era has its own shit that people have to deal with. He says, every age has its signature afflictions. Thus, a bacterial age existed. At the latest, it ended with the discovery of antibiotics. Now, I love this. The second sentence of this book is, despite widespread fear of an influenza epidemic, we are not living in a viral age. Really? We're not living in a viral age? Really? He says this, thanks to immunology technology, we have already left it behind. It's just funny. It's funny that this book, and let's see when the original German was written, 2010. So this book was written in 2010. He didn't know that COVID was coming, but it's very funny to read this now with this confidence that we've left that behind because of immunization. We haven't. We need a vaccine. But here's why that's important. He's using this analogy throughout the book of sort of like immunization and disease as one metaphor for how we think of society. And on the other side, he wants to talk about neurons and like the brain. So here's what he means. He gets into this idea that one of the ways we thought about society is via the virus or immunity, which creates a defensive thing. So the same way right now, many of us are just like, please protect us from COVID. Give us a treatment or vaccine, or flu season comes. What up, B-Boy Effect? Glad that you're here. For anyone who's just joining in, I'm kind of just getting started right now talking about the book that you see listed there. Literally, we're talking about the first couple sentences. So if you're joining in, cool. As always, if you've looked at this book before, awesome. If you haven't, that's totally fine as well. We'll talk about the ideas. It'll be accessible. If you want to look it up right now, hit my Twitter. It's at the bottom there, and I have a thing to the. It's sick. Jamie's here. Graduating from Europe. It's late, but I'm glad you're here. And that's a sick username as well. And Jamie, if any, you should jump in at any point. So everyone, Jamie, who's in the chat right now, Jamie Olsen, hopefully it's okay I said your full name shit. He's going to come on in a few weeks. I think when we, towards the end, talk about this with us. He's actually translated stuff from here. This is, why am I talking when he's here? But we'll get back to the sort of central, I guess, metaphor that's at play. So when he talks about the sort of the bacterial age and the viral age, we're thinking about a cultural tendency of like protection and defense. So let's protect ourselves from diseases. Let's protect ourselves from, hell yeah, I like this. Everyone introduce themselves. Dude Abides is the best. And Jamie's the best. Everyone's the best. If you're here, you're the best. Unless you're a dick, but no one here's a dick because everyone's cool. No one's ever been a dick in the chat here. So that's awesome. I've never had to like try to just kick someone out, which would suck because everyone's just cool. But back to this whole defense thing. So the idea here is that a lot of things in our culture are built in response to negativity, right? Even think about like, I don't know, the way we think about military defense. We are protecting ourselves from encroaching countries or other things. We're protecting ourselves from diseases. And think about the sort of conservative logic we use in society a lot. Like even like the fear of like immigration is we need to protect ourselves from people from another place, from the other, which is language that he uses in the book. Wild Day Pieces. I'm a crazy hick from a backwater town in Canada. At least we're all being honest. Like Letterkenny, fun show. Wild AP, let us know if people in Canada, do you guys love Letterkenny? I don't know. Speaking of Canadian shows, Schitt's Creek, Canadian comedy, just picked up all these awards. But think about it this way. In the beginning of the book, he's trying to say, we have thought of our problems as coming from outside, coming from someplace else. Like a disease comes from someplace else. The fear of like an immigrant or people from the other comes from someplace else. It's a negativity from outside myself, right? I want to protect myself from that. And what he's saying here is this is how society is sort of function and how thought is function. Now he wants to shift to talking about neurons. So he says this in the book. So I'll just read this. And I'm sorry if it's boring that I read, but you can follow along with the text too. But he says, from a pathological standpoint, the incipient 21st century is determined neither by bacteria nor by viruses. Oh, buddy, it is, but don't worry about it. But by neurons. It says neurological illnesses such as depression, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, borderline personality disorder, and burnout syndrome mark the landscape of pathology at the beginning of the 21st century. Now, if you yourself, listener, watcher, friend, foe, if you've never experienced depression, ADHD, borderline personality disorder, or burnout, you're lucky. But I would say most people I know have at least experienced serious burnout. I know a lot of people who have suffered with ADHD. I know I myself am someone that is dealt with clinical depression. These things seem to be specific to our era. I've talked to my mom and other older members of my family before, and they almost think it's weird when they hear that so many younger people are like going to therapy or on antidepressants or feeling burned out. And this is like Ann Helen Peterson's book, not the Burnout Generation, Can't Even Millennials and Burnout Culture. Her book kind of deals with this way that sometimes boomers and older people are basically just like, you guys are a bunch of weak cowards, like deal with it. So why is it that we have these specific problems and how they've affected us? So, and let me read this, and then I'll stop reading from the book, I promise. But he says this about all of these neurological illnesses and disorders. He says, they are not infections, but infarctions. They do not follow from the negativity of what is immunologically foreign, but from an excess of positivity. Therefore, they elude all technologies and techniques that seem to combat what is alien. Ooh, Jamie just posted something in the chat. I wonder what it is. Why will it not let me copy and paste it? Well, someone open that and see what it is. I bet it's not a virus. Maybe it's the text. Oh, fantastic. Guys, if you can give applause, give them to Jamie right now. Because we got text. We got text coming. That's awesome. So think about it this way, right? If you're suffering from the flu came from outside. If you're suffering from COVID, not to be grim, you contracted that as something outside of your subjectivity, your person, that is infecting you. But it's like a foreign invader. But if you're depressed or suffering from burnout, it's internal. Like, it's not like your depressed friend does a depressed cough, which I guess would be like, and then you catch the depressed cough and then you're just like, or it's not like an ADHD friend is like having ADHD shit going on and they sneeze and you catch the sneeze and you're like, what happened? Or it's not like a burned out friend can like burn out fart and you smell their fart and then you have burnout. These are things that are internal to you. Think about it this way. They're a part of your system, a part of your internal wiring. A part of our wiring is people. So it creates a different problem because we can't think, right, about the internal problem with the tools from the external immunological way of thinking about things. Now, the language he uses here is important. He wants to say that we're switching from negativity to positivity. Now, what is negativity? Is the disease that comes from outside. It's negative. It's negating me. If I catch the flu is negating my health. It's negatively affecting me. Now, you might want to think that, like, well, doesn't depression negatively affect you? Well, yeah, of course, it affects you negatively. But it's almost an overwhelming, or at least the type of mental illness he's talking about here, comes from too much positivity, right? And what do we mean when we say too much positivity? I mean, so this is a way I've thought about this. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and we'll get back to the text. But think about what work was like in a lot of Western countries in the middle through the later part of the 20th century. It involved protections. So it was a lot of negativity saying, okay, labor unions are going to protect us from, let's say, a company or boss that wants us to work too much, or from exporting our labor, or from unsafe conditions or whatever it might be, or from not getting paid enough. So this idea that when we thought about when we thought about our work, we were basically just saying, how can we protect ourselves from bad forms of labor? And now, I don't know about you, but in my life, work has changed a little bit. It's not so much about protecting things. It's more about, how do I phrase this? It's more like a constant cycle of yes, you can, let's do more. And I think he uses the language of yes, you can here. So like right now, if you're someone who works in any way, I don't know, let's say like even if you're like an Uber driver, you can always drive more. If you wanted to, not even if you wanted to, if you felt compelled to, you could be logged in constantly. You could not be sleeping. You could be getting jacked up on Mountain Dew Code Red and pissing in bottles on the side of the road, so you could just be driving constantly. You could sleep in your car if you needed to in between drives. It's this positive urge for do more, work harder, do this, do that. It's almost considered, I think in like a lot of millennial culture, if you were to say something like, yeah, and that's a great point, dude, Abides. I'm going to talk about that in a second. It's kind of this idea that like, if you're not hustling, grinding, charging, there's all this language people use that you're being lazy, right? And think about what the labor movement fought for in the middle part of the 20th century. They fought, and like when I say fought, we forget about this. There was like factory workers in Colorado who got shot with military weapons because they went on strike. So they literally fought, and people literally died to say, hey, an 8-hour workday is enough, and 5 days a week is enough, because we're fucking humans and we deserve to live. So people fought for those, and now it's all about that opportunity to hustle. And this I'm sure we've all heard this of like side hustle. I don't know a lot of people anymore that just have one job. I know at times I've had 3 different jobs or worked for a lot of different stuff. And what's the other problem with that? It doesn't stop. Like, you don't clock out of a lot of service industry work. You don't clock out of a lot of digital labor. You can be working all the time, and it could kind of haunt you. It could take over your life, this constant thing. If you ever like lied awake at night and you can't sleep because you just keep thinking about all the shit that you should do, that you could do, I mean, that's positivity, right? It's this overwhelming desire to do more, consume more, create more, make more, whatever it might be. Dude Abides 1985 brings up a really important quote, and it's this idea: do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I'm sure this is something many of us heard before. It's just like the biggest fucking lie. I grew up with this as well, but it's a way to convince us that we love labor. It's a way to convince us that like sacrificing our rights for a job It's good. I don't know. Even if you do stuff you love, it's not that great. And yeah, struggle fetishism, of course. And yeah, definitely in the service industry, this stuff happens. So that's kind of like what he gets into in a lot of interesting ways here. Now here, I'm gonna look ahead at my notes in this book. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. So if we can think about it this way, and if you're not like super versed in this language, don't even worry about it. But a language he uses here is this language of the other with a capital O. Now the other, when we're talking about it in kind of like philosophical and phenomenological terms, it's something that's like purely outside. So often when like people have, let's say when right-wing people in America have a fear of immigrants, they don't have a fear of a particular person or an actually existing person who is an immigrant. What they have a fear of is the other, right? This concept, this purely unknown, like scary boogeyman, that's the fear. Right now, a lot of us have a fear of like catching coronavirus, right? Which is other. Like I've had a flu, so like if I get the flu, that sucks, but I've had the flu before. If I get a cold, that sucks. I've had a cold before. Sore throat, whatever it might be. Diarrhea. All these things I've had before. They're not really other because I've experienced them in a subjective way. But because I right now, fucking knock on wood, haven't experienced coronavirus, it's purely other to me. I don't know what it is like. And that elicits a different type of fear. It's almost like if you watch horror cinema or like thriller movies, you know, why is it that the scariest characters and the scariest bad guys are the ones that we don't quite understand, that we might only see behind a shadow, that's wearing a mask? It's that otherness. Because if we know what the bad thing is, we can understand it or relate to it. So I'm going to read a quote from the book right here. This is on page 4. He says, where is this? Oh no, where is it? Oh yeah, it says because otherness is disappearing, right? And a way to think about this as well. Oh, and Jamie, I wonder if I think the thing you posted I read earlier, and I was excited about this because I looked up to see if Han had talked about coronavirus. Negative. He did. I mean, by negative, I mean he does, and it's kind of negative and scary, and kind of talking about how like now life is just survival. And Jamie, please correct me on this. But I read at least one thing where for him, what COVID is doing is reframing our lives and our existence. So it's primarily just about survival, not about like flourishing or experience. It's just like, how can I fucking survive? And there was one article I found that had quotes from a few different philosophers, also Marcus Gabriel, a German philosopher. But yeah, so definitely check that link out. Thank you so much, Jamie. I owe you a beer, a coffee, a snack, whatever you enjoy. Great. I'm glad I didn't say that wrong. So where was this quote? Okay. So because otherness is disappearing, we live in a time that is poor in negativity. I'm going to stop here. So Wild AP. Yes. This is fucking great. I'm so glad you noticed this. This is awesome. So Wild AP, the Canadian hick. That's self-deprecating. You're brilliant. You're smart. But hicks are smart. Canadians are smart. Love Canada. Everyone in America is going to pull this shit, by the way, where they're like, we're all moving to Canada after the election. But it's like, how are you going to do that? We're going to marry a Canadian? They have better taste than you. So something I noticed is a pretty big similarity between de Beauvoir's description of how one and other interact with each other and Han's description of the immunological age. I saw how the neurological age, as Han described it, symptom. Yeah, that's really good. And that's awesome that you noticed that. And yeah, that kind of language of otherness does really start popping kind of with Heidegger, and then in particular with the sort of existentialist or French existentialist usage of that in de Beauvoir. And of course, you know, when she talks about gender, she sets up, you know, woman as other to the universality of man. So like man is normative, woman is other. So yeah, so that connection's great. And once again, if you're just like tuning now, I didn't say this yet. I want to get back. So we're going to talk about the Burnout Society. Then I want to talk about starting de Beauvoir a little bit more. We'll kind of like deep dive into some stuff there. And after that, we'll see what people want to do. But I have some ideas. Jamie lets us know that we're focused on bare life survival, not the good life, according to Han. That's great. And then if anyone saw like the first few episodes, we were talking about the good life in Greek philosophy and what that means, which is what we should be pursuing, a life of goodness and virtue, the affirmation of our own humanity and the exploration of what goodness means. But right now it's like, how do I not die? How do I, for many people who lost jobs, like, how can I pay rent? How can I have access to healthcare? All that sort of shit. It's grim. So back to page 4 of the text. So he says, because otherness is disappearing, we live in a time that is poor in negativity. Now, when he says otherness is disappearing, I think one way we can think of that is like the outside world isn't as scary as it used to be because we know a lot. We understand illnesses in a way we didn't 50 years ago. We understand different cultures. Like, think of like 50 years ago, 60 years ago, if you weren't able to travel internationally, you probably weren't going to interact with people regularly from other countries, let's say, right? But many of us now, just from participating in social media, probably have friends that we haven't met in real life or people we interact with that live across the world that have completely different perspectives than us. So it's not like crazy otherness. It's like, oh, my friend Roberto in Argentina, who I never would have met, but now I know him and he's a normal dude and he tells me about life in Argentina. It's a little different, kind of the same. I understand it. And even in like consumer culture, right? You can get fucking McDonald's and Coca-Cola or Pizza Hut in most of the world. So there's been a flattening of culture. So things aren't as other as they used to be, right? So he says, and so the neuronal illnesses of the 21st century follow a dialectic. Not the dialectic of negativity, but that of positivity. They are pathological conditions deriving from an excess of positivity. Now, he uses the term dialectic there. If you don't know what that is, when we talk about dialectics in philosophy, we mean the interaction of two opposed concepts. So like being and nothing. Two dialectically opposed concepts. And now I'll just like be boring and do like a Hegelian thing. But what happens when we try to make sense of being and nothingness? These two things seem completely opposite. Oh no. Well, becoming. Going from nothingness to being and back and forth gives us a way to think about those things dialectically by introducing a third term. You often hear, if you like read about like Hegel, people will often reduce things to thesis, antithesis, synthesis. I have major problems with that language, but maybe that's something we'll talk about for another time. I don't want to deep dive on that right now. But dialectical thinking, and especially that has emerged in like 19th century thought, always involves negativity, always involves otherness or lack. It's not thinking about dialectics of there being too much or more than we can handle. And that's something he gets into here. And I think I might have told you all this before. I just started reading this as well. We're going on this journey together. The only expert is Jamie / B-Boy Effect. So let's see what we want to talk about. Also, too, if you read this and there's stuff you want to talk about, just post about it in the chat and we'll talk about it. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. I'm not going to stop here. I'm going to stop talking about that first essay here. So, I mean, the interesting thing I took away from the first essay here is just that basic shift between thinking about our problems in terms of positivity and negativity, thinking about things from that immunological model and this neurological model. And something I think is so brilliant about this is it's great to read a work of philosophy that is conceptual, meaning that, like, I don't know, reading this, I had to refresh my brain about some terms, about some figures. It's not necessarily like an easy read, but it's talking about something that is real. Like a real experience. Like the worst shit in philosophy, in my humble opinion, is stuff like the trolley problem, or if you don't know that, it's sort of like, well, as you do, you can either kill one person, or but then you save a bunch of lives, or you save the one person, you kill. It's just like, that never happened. It hasn't happened in life, so why should I waste my time worrying about a fictional scenario? A French philosopher, Alain Badiou, pointed this out once. But what Han is talking about thus far in this book is relatable. Many of us have dealt with this anxiety of like school wanting us to do a lot and family wanting us to do a lot and our jobs wanting us to do a lot, and this inability to cope with that and leading to legit mental illness and burnout. And I think that's been even more apparent the past 6 months around the world because of COVID. Now, what he gets to in the second essay, Beyond Disciplinary Society, is it on screen? Is something that I think is kind of brilliant. I'll talk about the general idea. But when we think about, so let's get back to Marx, right? Not that he's talking about Marx in the book right now, but, But for Marx, when we think about, the dialectic of labor relations, we have workers and bosses. The worker is one thing, and the boss is like another thing. And let's say our dialectic then is like workers, bosses, and the union helps us mediate those two, whatever. But the boss or the owner of production is this external thing. The worker's life sucks or can suck because of this external negativity. Now, something I think that's really brilliant in this text is Han gets into the idea that rather than experiencing that negativity in kind of the 21st century age of immaterial labor and digital labor, we become both things, like the boss and the mistreated laborer. So, like if you are a rideshare driver or doing like delivery apps, what is the big thing we hear, right? Oh, the freedom you have to work whenever you want to work, baby. That's all on you. You have that freedom. Or people that do freelance work. It's sort of like, oh, I'm working freelance, so I have the freedom to work when I want to work and blah, blah, blah. But we know that's bullshit because you don't have that freedom. It's a false choice. And here we're talking about some Sartrean stuff, which we could get back to later. But it's not a real freedom. You're being forced to work a lot, and you're the one that puts that pressure on yourself to do it. So I've worked freelance a lot. And I know at times I've been freelance working, which I think we use this term all around the world, but if any friend here is not from like North America or hasn't used that term before, working freelance just means you don't have a salary job. You're, doing different jobs for different people at a contract rate. But I didn't feel free. I felt really anxious when I've been freelance working because I'm always wondering, am I doing enough? Should I reach out more? Should I pitch more people? Should I try to get another writing job? Should I see if people need more work from me? And it's this constant thing. Whereas I've been working full-time recently, and I feel a little bit more chill because I don't feel like I have to constantly produce, even though I kind of do feel like that still. It's a lot. Now, there's a line, and this is on the first paragraph of the first page. This is page 8 of the essay Beyond Disciplinary Society. It says this. He draws this distinction between obedient subjects and achievement subjects, right? So when we talk about subjects, I think we talked about this a little bit with Sartre. But it's like you're a subject, right? You're an autonomous individual that is affected by the world. So we know the pour soi in soi thing we talked about, or for itself and in itself with Sartre. The reason you're a subject and the koozie is not is because you can do something different. You can will to be something else. This koozie, sadly, is just a koozie. It's a pink piece of fabric that's meant to keep a can of beverage cooler. Sorry, koozie. Now, this distinction between obedient subjects and achievement subjects I like, because it makes me think of like how in a previous era, it was all about obedience. Be a good worker. Be a good student. Obey and you will be rewarded. Fall in line and your life will be good. Now, we don't have that culture. The culture is like hustle, achieve, grind, do more. We don't obey. We're independent free thinkers, right? That's that whole sort of culture. And I think he's analyzing it in like a really interesting way. And he says achievement society more and more is the process of discarding negativity. Think about it this way. What do companies do these days? Especially think about tech companies. What do they do if their employees are overworked? Well, you get like a yoga class or something going, right? Or you get like a smoothie bar installed in the place. You kill negativity. Or let's say like I'm struggling with work or I'm feeling burned out. Maybe a friend says to me, oh my God, you're feeling bad at work. Read this book. And also there's this tea I drink. And also there's this guided meditation I listen to. And also I've done this thing with like waking up in the middle of the night to exercise. That helps me a lot. And also I do micro napping. We have all these methods, the goal of which is to like kill negativity. To kill those negative vibes and try to make us these achievement subjects. To touch back on, and I don't have the book in this room, but I'll grab it later. To touch back on Anne Helen Peterson's recent work on burnout, which is more sociological, I guess. She brings up this idea of how sometimes at work, we see other people around us doing so much, and then we get anxious because we're not working as hard as them. And she's basically like, that's bullshit. What we should be doing is realizing that that's crazy. And it's crazy to be working constantly. And it's crazy to act like achievement is the only thing we have to do. We should be able to take a step back. So it's great to have a couple different books criticizing that culture. Now, he calls this unlimited can. And by unlimited can, he doesn't mean like if this was a can of beer that it just kept refilling no matter what. That'd be cool. or soda or water, depending on your thing. You know, everyone should have fun the way they want to have fun. But he says unlimited can is the positive modal verb of achievement society. Its plural form, the affirmation, yes, we can, which was Obama's slogan, I think, in his 2008 campaign. I don't know. Also, guys, politics this week, rough. Just rough. Last week, we talked about the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Then next week, Trump is now nominating a woman to the Supreme Court who says she wants to turn America into the kingdom of God. If you do not live in America, I know a few of you here don't, you're lucky. Shit's going to get weird here. And then our president said he might not recognize the outcome of an election. I feel fine. And then, of course, the police that murdered Breonna Taylor didn't get charged. This is America, by the way, that this woman who's in her bed, gets shot by a police officer, and the only charge that is filed is against a cop, not for shooting her, but for shooting drywall that affected a neighbor's apartment. What the fuck? Okay, but let's start. You didn't come here for that. I love this. So he's once again talking about this difference between negativity culture and positivity culture, between obedience and between yes I can, do more. And he says this. He says its negativity produces madmen and criminals. So this idea that the culture of obedience creates either crazy people or criminals. He says, in contrast, achievement society creates depressives and losers. That one kind of knocked me on my ass. And I don't know if anyone knows like the trope of the fail son. Sort of like the failed, especially like male offspring millennial. If you watch The Sopranos, AJ Soprano is the ultimate fail son because he grows up in this great environment, has all these opportunities, and just like fails constantly and is kind of, for lack of a better term, a loser. And of course, depressives as well. So what I think the interesting question posed at this point in the book is, okay, we get why society is like this, right? We've shifted from a model of this immunological thing where we're worried about the other, the disease, the immigrant, the mean boss, the foreign military, defense. Now we've shifted towards a culture of internalized, I'll say anxiety or fear, where it's sort of like the call is coming from inside the house, right? Opening shot of Scream, check it out. But now we're worried about things that we kind of do to ourselves via this drive for positivity. Now note, and he gets at this, we all know this, that drive for positivity isn't our fault. It's a cultural ideology that we grow up in. To touch back on Sartre and some stuff we talked about last time, you know, some of the critics of existentialism were just like, oh, so you mean like anyone can be whatever they want and there's no God and there's no purpose? And Sartre is like, no, we're free, but we're not free to choose what situation we're born into. So like none of us said, you know what, magical entity in the sky, I want to exist in an era of increased precarity and mental health struggle and global conflict and economic depressions and where it's hard to get a job and everyone's in debt. We didn't want that. So we're born into those circumstances and those things shape our subjectivity. So we have a subjectivity that's shaped by a scarcity that's affected us internally. So much talking, I'm sorry. I mean, but here, and he gets into that right after the sentence I just read. He says, on one level, continuity holds in the paradigm shift from disciplinary society to achievement society. Clearly, the drive to maximize production, do more, make more, be more, yes, you can, inhabits the social unconscious. So even if like you're hearing this and you're like, I don't think that, I don't want to make more, that's stupid, I'm smart, I'm woke, I'm a cool Canadian, or something, shouts to Wild AP, and I don't believe that shit. Han's point, of course, is like, well, you might not consciously think that, but of course, unconsciously, you're shaped by that culture. Like, I'm someone who's an obnoxious, like, Marxist, fuck the man, studied philosophy, critical thinking, but I, like, can't sleep at night sometimes because I worry that I haven't done enough, that I'm not successful enough, that I might get fired from my job, all these things. That's because of a cultural unconscious that we all experience. He goes on to say this: the positivity of can is much more efficient than the negativity of should. And think about it this way. Are you more likely to do something if someone is like, do this or I'll beat the shit out of you? Or if it's almost this cultural ideology of like, you You can do this. It's you. You're the winner. You're the hero. Work 15 hours a day. You got this. It's really sick. And not sick in a cool way. Sick like, gross, sick. It says the achievement subject is faster and more productive than the obedient subject. Oh boy. God, there's a lot of stuff that I liked in this thing. Okay, so let's wrap up with this. I'm gonna look at some stuff on pages 10 and 11. 10 and 11 right there. If you're still here, I appreciate it. If this is boring, let me know, and we'll do something different next time. You can let me know, and it won't hurt my feelings. I don't have feelings. I do have feelings, but they won't be hurt because I understand it, and I'm doing this for us, not for me. I'm doing this for us. I could just read this book on my own, but it's more fun to read it with y'all and talk about it. Okay, so talks about Nietzsche, blah, blah, blah. Okay, this is the shit that really blew me away. He says, the new human type, us, standing exposed. Maybe I'll put the book here so I can look at you more while I do this. Standing exposed to excessive positivity without any defense lacks all sovereignty. The depressive human is an animal laborans that exploits itself. That exploits itself. So once again, we're not thinking about a paradigm where we are exploited by an external force. We exploit ourselves. You know, like when I, at times in my life, have like made myself stay up to do extra jobs that I'm not even sure if I needed to do, I'm exploiting myself. I'm the one who's like, get to work, you fucking loser. Or if I'm a rideshare driver that's totally burned out but has to log in again to get more rides to get my bonus, in a sense, I'm exploiting myself, right? It says it is predator and prey at once. Predator and prey at once. So once again, I'm doing some sort of contract labor. I'm the one who's like, fuck it, loser, you got to do this. And I'm also the one whose life sucks because I have to do it. And then right after this, there comes a definition of depression that says, you know, first and foremost, depression is creative fatigue and exhausted ability. I'll read that again. Depression is creative fatigue and exhausted ability. Now, I'll say this isn't a critique of the book. I do think it's important to note that I assume the definition of depression here is a bit more like phenomenological, and that it's the description of a mood that people have rather than like a clinical diagnosis of chemical reactions in the brain. Now, of course, depression isn't just like magically in the brain. It's created by external conditions and socialization and stuff. But I just want to like, you know, point that out. As you see, like this last page, I just marked up a lot of stuff because there's so much good shit here. I'll try to not just read the whole thing. But top of 11, he says, the complaint of the depressive individual, nothing is possible, can only occur in a society that thinks nothing is impossible. Just a brilliant line, right? How often have we just felt like everything sucks, nothing is possible, what can I do in this world anymore? I can't affect change. I'm not going to be able to get out of like the job I'm in, the relationship I'm in, whatever it is. Of course, we only feel that because we live in a society that's like everything is possible. You can achieve your dream. Your job will be what you love, blah, blah, blah. Also, he doesn't quote him in this book, but Soren Kierkegaard's really great on this in his book Sickness Unto Death, where Kierkegaard talks about being caught between infinity and finitude, the impossible and the possible. It's really great stuff, and I wrote, you might see this, I wrote in my notes, see where it says SK and despair. It's because I want to look this up again and think about it in terms of Kierkegaard. Also, you know, if you're reading this, if you have access to a printer, like print it out, you take notes on it. It's always fun. Okay, so he says that. Then he says, the achievement subject finds itself fighting with itself. Skipping a line. Depression is the sickness of a society that suffers from excessive positivity. It reflects a humanity waging war on itself. Jesus. Then he brings up this line, compulsive freedom. We talked about this before, and like, I'm free to like drive Uber or whatever it is. And then finally, the last line I'll quote from right there. He says this, excessive work and performance escalate into auto-exploitation, right? So the idea is, how genius is contemporary capitalism, what some people call late capitalism, that it doesn't even need like an asshole boss to exploit me when I'll exploit myself, right? Like, think about that. This idea that capitalism is at such a stage that it's self-reproducing and creates systems where my unconscious becomes the asshole boss. My unconscious exploits me. makes me feel like my only role is a laborer to produce and do shit. Where my unconscious doesn't say to me, think about it this way. Have you ever felt bad for like, say, just like fucking off during the day, like watching a movie, playing an instrument, taking a walk, doing recreational drugs, playing video games, playing golf, I don't know, whatever it is you do, but you do something that's not work and your brain is just like, fuck, this is bad. I feel guilty. You know what, guys? I feel guilty right now. Why do we feel guilty for doing things that are affirming our humanity? Why do we feel guilty for exploring our passions and interests? Why do we feel guilty for enjoying friendship or pizza or nachos or video games or movies? These are good things, right? Why do we feel guilty? Because our unconscious that's built on this compulsive freedom that says, yes, I can, and yes, I can achieve, create auto exploitation where we're the mean boss in our head. And I think that's a really brilliant analysis of what's going on in society and what's going on with late capitalism. And when we say late capitalism, once again, we're just saying like the thing that capitalism has turned into in the contemporary age, where we have access to like digital technology, where most work or a lot of work in the developed West isn't physical manual labor and production. And I think it's a great analysis of this cultural moment. Now, there's a movie that came out a couple weeks ago. If anyone here, I know some of you watch Wisecrack content. I got to host the movie podcast, Show Me the Meaning, this week. And we talked about Social Dilemma, this documentary on Netflix. Now, a lot of smart people are like, this movie is fucking bullshit. I get what they're saying. It's problematic in so many ways. And the reason the movie is problematic is because it gets at what's so fucked up about social media, but doesn't connect it to capitalism, doesn't connect it to this larger culture of exploitation. But something the movie basically says is like, our addiction to social media becomes a thing by which we are doing what Han is talking about here. We're self-exploiting. We're addicted to apps and websites and networks that take our data and turn it into a product, but we are doing that thing and we're exploiting ourselves. Whew. If you do have Netflix, I'll say this as well. That documentary, I mean, it's fun, watch it. But there's another documentary that came out last week. It's from 2019, but it's on Netflix now, called Capital in the 21st Century. And there's this economist, I'll probably say his name wrong, Thomas Piketty or Thomas Piketty. I don't know what one says. I don't care. I'm bad at pronunciations. I'm a hick American. Shouts to Wild AP, just a couple of hicks. But it's about kind of how we got to where we got in terms of late capitalism. And I think watching that movie will like help illuminate this. Why am I holding it up when it's on the screen? I went through all this effort of like, not all this effort. I fucking downloaded an image and loaded it in here. But yeah, so I would say like, if we have homework for next week, here's what we're gonna do. Let's keep going at this pace. If you haven't read anything yet, read Neuronal Power and Beyond Disciplinary Society. I'm gonna read through Vita Activa, so the 4th section, but there's no rush, right? So we'll be through page like 20 next week. Take that at your own pace. Scroll back up. Remember, B-Boy Effect, our buddy Jamie, has posted links to translations and other text. If you read this and it didn't make sense, go back and read it again after we just talked about it. But along with that, if you can, watch that film. Watch Capital in the 21st Century if you're not as familiar with like contemporary, theories of contemporary capitalism and what late capitalism means. I think that film will help kind of give some context to this. So yeah, chat's been kind of mellow. That's fine. Hope we're doing okay. In the meantime, gonna be back here next week. We're gonna talk about 2 more sections, and hopefully we talk about everything as a whole eventually. Pretty soon we are gonna have. He's agreed to do this. He better not back out. Jamie Olsen's gonna come on at one point. Another guy, Austin Smith, who some of you might know, he might come on and talk about this book at some point. And another guy, there's someone else who might as well. It's fucked up that all the people I have talking about it are dudes, though. I'm aware of that. I'm kind of embarrassed about that. I'll try to do better in the future. Fuck me. I'm trash. But you're not trash. But this has been fun. Here's what I'll say, too. If you have more questions, hit me up on Twitter, @Michael_O_Burns. You can message me there. As Jamie can tell you, I'm horrible at email. If you need to email me, it's michaeloneilburns@gmail.com. But I fucking suck, and I miss things, and I'm a loser, and it's horrible. But Jamie's the best. Wild AP is the best. Dude Abides is the best. I think that's everyone who's been active in the chat, but you three fucking rule. So next Friday, back. Going to talk about this book. Watch Capital of the 21st Century. We'll get into this. Send me questions in the meantime. And have a great day. Have a good weekend. This has been Philosophy Rips. I'm Michael. You're you. We love each other. You're the best. Bye.